Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Sokol, and this is Parsha Inspired. We're taking a look at the Kohanim, the priests who will be offering their services in the third temple, as described in Ezekiel 44, where it says that the Kohanim, the ones who served and God during the exile, those people will be merited to serve on only them in the third temple. Those are the people who will differentiate between pure and impure, and these Kohanim will not get a portion in the land of Israel. God says, I am your inheritance. So the question is why? Who are the Kohanim? Well, the Kohanim are descendants of Aaron. Aaron is Moshe Rabbeinu's older brother. He's the one who kept quiet when Moshe Rabbeinu was given the job by God, and he said, I'm not going to get involved. In fact, I'm going to accept God's will, even though my brother's getting all the fame. And because of his keeping quiet, he did this once again when his two oldest children were killed by bringing an offering which wasn't commanded by God, for various reasons that are given in the Talmud. But primarily, he kept quiet. Now, furthermore, on that same day, on the first day of Nisan, there was another event that happened, which is stunning, which is in fact equally or even more stunning, which was the children of Aaron, Elazar and Itamar. And they witnessed their brothers being killed. Moshe told them, you cannot sit in mourning, and you need to continue offering and doing all the programming in the Mishkan. But what did they do? They did not eat the Karban of Rosh Chodesh. They in fact burnt it. And Moshe came to them and said, and he was upset. It says, Vayiktzaf Moshe. Moshe gets very upset. And he looks at Elazar and Itamar, and he says, why? Don't you know the halacha? And Elazar and Itamar, Rashi says, knew exactly the answer, but yet they kept quiet. And because they kept quiet, they held back and answering back to Moshe Rabbeinu, their uncle. Through their mouth, the land was divided. In fact, in Joshua we see that Elazar stood next to the lottery, and each Jew passed by, and the lottery would speak, and Elazar would sit there wearing the breastplate with all the 12 stones, and he, through his mouth, the land was distributed. All because he kept quiet. Meaning, holding back from speaking is what Kedusha is. And that's the Kedusha that the Sfas Emes says of the Kohanim. That the Kohanim, these priests, have something special. They have the ability to keep quiet, but they also have, because of that, more mitzvos, more commandments. And these commandments itself are what make them more holy. When we say a bracha, we say, Asher kedishanu b'mitzvosav. Those words mean God has made us holy through his commandments. A commandment is an opportunity to be able to get more kedusha. When God restricts himself, the more God holds back and gives us an opportunity to do his will, then we become more inherently holy. And from here we have to go a little further. You see, Miriam, Moshe's older sister, decided that she is going to take her parents. Before Moshe was born, the parents were separated. And they separated because they said, all children are being killed. All boys are being killed. So why should we bring children into the world? And Miriam said, Paro only made a decree against the firstborn, yet you want to make a decree against all children. And then Moshe is born, and they put him in the Nile. But there is another king who did the same thing, and that is Chizkiyahu. Chizkiyahu gets up, and he doesn't have children until the age of 80. Isaiah comes to him and says to him, how could you not have children? And Chizkiyahu says, my son, I see, will be Menashe, who will be a terrible king, who will do sin. And Hashem said to tell the Navi to tell him that God will do what he wants to do, but you need to do your part. And in fact, when Moshe Rabbeinu came to Yisro, his father-in-law, and married Yisro's daughter, Moshe made a deal with Yisro. Yisro said, your first son needs to be for Avodah Zarah. Meaning, he said to Moshe, I want our grandson to be able to find God the way Abraham found God, the way I found God. And that is through seeing in the darkness, through being in Mitzrayim, and then being able to experience God from the low places. That was what Yisro wanted. And in fact, Moshe, strangely enough, agreed. And the commentators have difficulty understanding why would Moshe agree that his son, his first son, will be to Avodah Zarah. And in fact, the Talmud tells us that Menashe was a descendant from Moshe, who came into this world because Moshe said that his child should be to Avodah Zarah. See, Moshe, his entire coming was miraculous, was like no other prophet. In fact, one of the 13 principles of the Rambam is that we have to believe that there was no other prophet like Moshe. But people say in other nations perhaps there was, like Bilam. But Moshe, we have to understand, is not something that's transferable. Meaning holiness, that he was born into holiness. And ironically, Pharaoh himself raised Moshe on his knee. But that type of holiness, where you're born that way and the house lights up, those are the leaders of Klal Yisrael. Those are the ones who God places in the world to direct us. Kazeh Rev Kadesh, to look at them and say, this is where we're supposed to go. We could all believe Korach wanted to be like Moshe. You know, he made a fight. He said, I could also be Moshe. And Korach, the earth swallowed up. But the commentaries explain that every person should think and believe that he could be like Moshe. So who are the Kohanim? The Kohanim are a special breed. They're ones who are put into this world for their purpose. Just like a man and a woman have different purposes in Judaism, and they have different commandments, so too does the Kohen have different commandments. They were given this because of quality of their great-great-grandfather, who was able to hold back and say nothing when he had what to say. And this is why the Kohanim were given the power to make kadosh and tameh. When they would see the mitzvah or the person with leprosy, they had to say the word tahor or tameh. If they said tameh and they were the house became impure and they became impure, a violation. So they left the house, and while not looking at the mitzvah anymore, they said the word tameh. They had the ability to say words and create something. And that's what Emor is. This week's portion, we start out by Yomer Hashem el Moshe Emor el HaKohanim. Emor means that you should declare. Just like God declared and the world was created, God declared. And his declaration creates. Also the Kohanim, their declaration creates. Us, the ones who are not Kohanim, we get a portion in the land. But the Kohanim and the Levim, they live in everyone's portion, because we need to have these people, these righteous people, who are living on a different plane. They are serving God, and we give them our tithes, we support them. But we have to understand that for the person who is not a Kohen or a Levi, his portion is in Eretz Yisrael. Now, his children, Moshe Rabbeinu's children, did not continue in this path of Moshe Rabbeinu, because it's not something that could be passed on. But us, the Yisraelim, we're the real players, meaning that just like Shabbos gets its holiness from the 6 days of the week, so too the Kohanim. They get their holiness through blessing the Jewish people. When they bless the Jewish people, that's where their holiness comes. Meaning, this is another piece of the puzzle of all working to get all the Jews into this land and to be able to have the process where our Kohanim can serve us and we can support the Kohanim. That's the messianic message. And us, the Jewish people, will be, as if to say, the priests for the rest of the world. We will be the ambassadors to the rest of the world. As it says in the Talmud, that eventually when Mashiach comes, that the whole Eretz Yisrael will become like Kadosh, like Jerusalem. Thank you for watching. Chazak v'amat says, Michal Weichbrod says, B'Shabbos, Shalom from just outside Jerusalem.